behind? What got you through the struggle or what got you through the grind? It's all.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hey everybody, this is Fago Franklin III with Newsstitched Media. Today I am joined by NFL scout Daniel Kelly. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well, Mr. Franklin. How are you?
I'm blessed. I can't complain. Before we get into your journey, could you give my viewers some words of encouragement for today?
Absolutely. The word impossible is only a word, is what I like to tell people. Impossible is a word in the dictionary. It is not reality. Impossible is a mindset, but nothing is really impossible. Whatever your dream is, go for it, because as you'll learn, if I could do it, you can do it too.
Amen. Thank you for those words of encouragement.
You're welcome.
So what actually got you started in sports? And why did you like sports in the first and foremost?
Absolutely, Mr. Franklin, to our listeners. It was really something that happened as a little boy. I was 8 years old, kind of running around the house like most kids do. And my parents had a playoff game on TV. I grew up in Minnesota. They have the Minnesota Vikings on against the Washington Redskins. And the way I describe it is like when two people meet each other, it was love at first sight. It was like my eyes were like I gravitated towards the television. I mean, those colors, those fans, the environment was electric. It captured my mind, my imagination, and my heart at that exact moment. And from that point, there was no turning back. How much did I like the Washington Redskins growing up in Minnesota, you may ask? Well, the next year after they won the Super Bowl, my first season as a fan when I was 8, they went back to the Super Bowl against Oakland the following year, lost 38-9 against the Raiders, and I took it so hard I threw up and missed 3 days of school. That gives you guys an idea. But that's how it all started, Mr. Franklin. I mean, that's it just took off from there like an airplane off a runway. It just took off like a jet. It just took off from there, and it just grew and grew. My passion continued to grow. I watched every Redskins game. My grandma would take me to all the sports bars when I was little. They would know her as a Redskins grandma. She'd be the oldest person in the place, drinking a cup of coffee. I drink a Coke. We watch the game together. I just went crazy. I went crazy. I mean, if I wasn't talking about the Redskins, I was thinking about the Redskins. If I wasn't thinking about the Redskins, I was reading about the Redskins. If I was reading about them, I was dreaming about them. If I wasn't dreaming about them, I was talking to my grandma about. I mean, it was just all consuming all the time. I couldn't get enough of it. It was like being at an all-you-can-eat buffet, but you never get full. And I just kept consuming all the stuff, and it just really took off from there, sir.
Amen to that. So what actually got you into being a scout?
Well, I didn't get big enough to play. I was about 14, 15, like some boys. I wanted to play maybe linebacker at Penn State. Took one look in the mirror, learned that wasn't going to happen. And I was 130 pounds soaking wet, no matter how many large pizzas I ate, how much weight gain of 2,200 I put in my shakes in the morning. I stayed 130 pounds. And, I wanted to play. I loved the game so much. I kind of dabbled in coaching a little bit. I used to exchange letters with now Hall of Fame coach Joe Gibbs when he was a coach of the Redskins. Even suggested a play for him that I sent him to actually work for a touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons in a preseason game when I was 17 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina against the Atlanta Falcons. But I just, I knew my passion, my heart, like I didn't, I could do well in school, but I didn't because that's not where my passion, my heart was, which is a totally different show. It annoyed my parents to no end. But everything changed for me, Mr. Franklin. When I was 17 years old, my parents gave me a book for my birthday called Tony Rizzano's Secrets of NFL Scout. And this was the guy who was Bill Walsh's personnel man, the guy who convinced Bill Walsh to draft a guy named Joe Montana instead of Steve Dills. Steve who? And, he was the personnel director, and he had all these Super Bowl rings on his fingers in the front cover. And I couldn't put this book down. To me, it was like, back in my day, kids used to play records backwards to see if there's a subliminal message somehow came out. Well, for me, I read that book backwards and forwards almost and studied it because he gave examples. Back when I started trying to do this, when my dream first became to be an NFL scout, which was really a birth for me in that book by Mr. Rizzano, there was nothing like this. There was no internet. There was no, all these shows, all this. I mean, there was one little tiny book I bought every year called Jerry Jones, not the owner of the Cowboys, but another gentleman by the name of Jerry Jones called The Drugstore List. And he'd have like a sentence or two on each player. There was nothing thing back then. So getting this book for me was really incredible because he had examples of scouting reports in his book. There was reports about Bo Jackson and all these guys and what the reports look like. So what I did, Mr. Franklin, and to our listeners, is I started like taping every single college football game I possibly could, on TV. And then I'd go back and I'd watch them and start writing up scouting reports myself and like watching all the movements, everything he said to pay attention to, and what to evaluate. I just started doing it. So really, I self-taught myself in my parents' house in my bedroom. And when I was 18, I wrote my first ever 70-page NFL draft report on all the prospects. It was the year Desmond Howard came out. I'm dating myself, but it was the year Desmond Howard came out with that pose, that Heisman pose. I won't do it. I won't do it, but you know the pose. Two things I won't do in the show. I won't do the pose and I won't sing. But other than that, I'll do just about anything. But it was something where I put together this report and sent to Charlie Casserly, who was the general manager of the Washington Redskins at the time, asking him for an internship. And he said, hey, check back up to your first year of college. You're still too young. Check back. But that's really when I started getting into the scouting and getting into it with just kind of just birth out reading that book. And I knew it's what I wanted to be. I mean, I would run around, Mr. Franklin, our listeners, I'd run around the school. I'd tell everybody, hey, I'm going to be an NFL scout. Two things, that everybody did in my school. Number one, they always let me know the Redskins, they said Redskins suck, right? They put all that through my yearbook. Mm-hmm. And second thing, they said, hey, you're never going to be an NFL scout. But I knew at that point I wanted to be an NFL scout, and that's where I set my sights going forward.
How important is it to actually build those connections up?
It varies. You'll get a lot of people, Mr. Franklin, that will tell you that it's a who knows who business, and a lot of it is. If you look at the NFL and you trace some of those family trees and stuff back, you'll see a lot of guys came from that. But that's not my story. My story is I really came in with no connections when I got hired at the New York Jets in pro scouting. But it never hurts. People ask me all the time, what do I have to do to become an NFL scout? I tell people two things. And of course, it's not always the answer they want because they're hoping I could pick up the phone and call one of these guys and get them hired. But the way it worked for me was I always tell people, I said two things. Number one, pay very close attention to the ideas that just come to your mind out of nowhere. Just, because they come, I believe, from God. And number two is pay very special attention to the people that are brought into your path, because that's the way it happened for me. So are the connections important? Yeah. Can they be manufactured? Not too likely, because a lot of times these guys are so guarded because everyone's always coming at them for something. So it just has to be kind of a natural thing that happens, like it was for me when I met Tony Dungy when I was 21 years old with the Minnesota Vikings. I just happened to be in the same room as him at the same time, and my path was literally directed into his path. And so it can be important, but that's not how I got into the NFL.
So what is the pros and cons with being an NFL scout? Because I know there's a lot of criticism that comes with it, as most jobs are.
Absolutely. Well, everybody thinks they know better than you. That's the first one. They're always like, you hear the sports shows, right? You always hear people calling in, you're up in Seattle, right? So you always hear the people say, what is Pete Carroll doing? Every time they lose a game, what is John Schneider doing? What are these people doing? What are they thinking? That's really the biggest con, if you will. You got to have thick skin. And you also have to be a person that's not afraid to work more than 24 hours a day. It's not possible, but trust me, you almost work that much. So you have to be, the pros is if you love it, it's a great thing. If you love football, it's a great thing. If you can sit there, if you're one of these people that just loves to watch film and loves to watch game tape and all this stuff, it's a great thing, because literally speaking, I can be watching film and it can feel like I can sit there for 10 hours and it feels like 10 minutes. So the pros are I could list them. I mean, we'd be on the show all day. I loved it. I loved doing it when I did it with the Jets. I've loved every second of it since. It's something that's just really an incredible experience. You get a chance to look at all these players, go all these places, be around all these people all the time, the NFL greats, all this stuff, travel. I love traveling. There's the list goes on. For people who love football, it's a great job as far as I'm concerned.
Was the transition from being an NFL scout to being a sports reporter or a sports journalist or sports writer, was it hard, difficult for you? Because right now you're working for Sports Illustrated right now.
Correct. Yeah, it's a real easy transition of going from everything I've done in my past has prepared me for my present and my future. So I mean, it's an easy transition. For example, you mentioned Sports Illustrated, right? For them with the Detroit Lions right now, and it's back when I first started the Jets, you'll like this, right? So back when I first started the Jets, I was one of those guys that did like one finger at a time on the typewriter, right?
Mhm.
I couldn't type.
You said typewriter. We're that old.
Hey! I talked. If you caught before, I said I started this before the internet came out. So I started when AOL had dial-up with this. You have mail. But yeah, typewriter. That's right. Back in the day when TV was not in black and white, so I'm not that old. But no, it was. I started typing. I was one finger at a time. But during my time at the Jets, my boss, who's Scott Pioli at the time, who's Bill Parcells' son-in-law, who's a five-time NFL Executive of the Year, NFL Executive of the Decade for his work, of course, with the New England Patriots under Coach Belichick. He would give me like stacks of papers every day. One of my job duties. I mean, I was entry level. Let's not kid ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, you come in there, you're doing everything from getting chicken wings to driving people to the airport, data entry, whatever they ask you to do. Jump through a hoop, whatever it is. So I'm sitting there. They give me a stack of papers about this big every day from a thing called SportScan. And what Scott would do, Scott Pioli, he would go through with a highlighter and he would, like highlight all the pertinent information. So-and-so had hamstring injury on Sunday. This guy got arrested for DWI. This person here's got, arrested on handgun charges. And so all this stuff. So I would enter all this information to the computer system. So I started to learn real fast, Mr. Franklin, one of two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to get done with the stuff and go home or I'm not. So I started becoming faster and faster typing. So by the time that I left the New York Jets after 4 seasons, I could literally type 90 words a minute. And so the translation is not only does a football experience and what all these great things these guys, Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, Scott Pioli, all these guys that work with Dick Haley, not only do you get all the experience gained as far as what they're looking for and what they're looking at, but you also, which of course complement my skill set that I brought in there greatly, but also all the administrative stuff. So now as it translates into media, working with Sports Illustrated, I can turn out a 1,500 word essay, or an article. Rather, I say essay because my wife's in school. Go to school. She's talking about essays. See, that's where my mind is right now. Happy wife, happy life. I'm always thinking about my wife. But but you type I type so fast that it's nothing for me to turn out those kind of articles in a moment's notice. So it all adds to where I am today, sir.
So what is it like working for Sports Illustrated? I mean, that's a prestigious company right there. So what it's like? Give me some gems, man.
Hey, absolutely. It's a dream come true. I mean, you're looking at a guy that, when my folks took me to the grocery store when I was a kid, it's the first thing my eyes went right to. Every time I went to the, grocery store, you're seeing Sports Illustrated, you're seeing, you're picking it up. I mean, back then that was king. I mean, now there's all these sports publications, but back then that's about almost all there was, besides maybe the sporting news. So and Pro Football Weekly, but just, having a chance to see that growing up, and then growing into being an adult and now having a chance to write for them is especially the Detroit Lions is really incredible because back in 2019, I had a chance to Bruce Allen, who was the president of the Washington Redskins at the time, actually flew me out to Washington and interviewed me. And after that interview for a position in coaching or scouting, I went back to where I was living at the time in Arizona, and I did what's called advanced scouting reports on all the teams in the NFL that the Redskins were going to play at the time. And one of those teams I did was the Detroit Lions. And that team really resonated with me. The people they had on the team really resonated with me. The players really resonated with me. So now it's like, it's kind of wild how, a lot of times my mom would always have me play Connect the Dot when I was a kid, when we go and be places and trips and stuff. Those old books, you connect the dots, look, it's an elephant, but it's so wild because when I look back at that experience with Mr. Allen with the Redskins in 2019, now he was let go on Black Monday, so I didn't get the position with the team, which I would have had otherwise probably. But looking back at how much that I took to the Detroit Lions and now looking 2 years later at the fact I've been writing for them for the last 10 months, it's really incredible to me. It really is. It's an awesome experience. It's a tremendous platform. And, I feel that, I bring kind of a unique perspective because, again, my story is different, Mr. Franklin, than a lot of guys who are in the media or a lot of guys who've been in the NFL who are in the media, because my experience is being my story, my book I wrote, even Whatever It Takes, it's a a true story of a fan making into the NFL. And so when I write, I'm not writing from a coach's perspective or from an agent's perspective or from a player standpoint, but I'm writing from a fan's perspective. So I get that heart, that emotion into it. I sometimes I'm like, I gave one of their players an F+ as a grade, and that lit everything up. Even the player responded to me on Twitter, so that passion comes out in my articles. So it all translates, but it's an incredible experience. I mean, it's no two ways about it. It's a tremendous honor. It's a tremendous privilege. It's something that I love to do. And I feel truly blessed for the opportunity to be writing for Sports Illustrated Detroit Lions, sir.
Do you like the trade with Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff? Do you like that trade, Mr. Detroit Lions writer?
Here's where the interview gets interesting. Oh, yes. I could say off record, but that's not going to work in this case.
Nope.
No, it's to me, it was really, I wrote an article for SI Detroit Lions, and I said Stafford could become potentially the NFL MVP last year before the season began. So I like Stafford a lot. I think Stafford's given a lot of his blood, sweat, and tears to Detroit Lions. I saw some of the fallout after they traded him. It seemed like a very emotional transition for him and his wife. So I like Stafford. I also like Goff. Every time now, I'm not a big Rams guy, so I don't watch a lot of the Rams games. I see them whenever they're on, whatever the TV's on. But I've always liked Goff too. So every time I look up, he's throwing a 60-yard touchdown at the halftime highlights. So I think it's probably a good thing for both of them. I'm not against a trade whatsoever. Sometimes a change of venue is what it's all about. I know some quarterbacks have gone some different places. I know when Rich Gannon, for example, ended up in Oakland, he was the NFL MVP and he won the Super Bowl at 39 years old. I know Doug Williams started with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That whole thing went down. He was out of the NFL. He was the USFL. Then all of a sudden he ends up with the Washington Redskins. They won the Super Bowl back at Super Bowl 22. So to me, sometimes a change of venue can be a really good thing. I know one thing's for sure. It will be interesting to see how it plays out.
Where do you think Deshaun Watson is going to go?
That's an interesting one. I love Deshaun Watson with a capital L. This guy is incredibly dynamic. To me, he's the most dynamic player in the National Football League. It's going to be interesting to see if this is just a bunch of posturing and just trying to get to know the new regime, and all of a sudden he's going to be back with Houston after it's all said and done, because he does, to my understanding, have a no trade clause in his contract. But if he ends up going somewhere, it's probably going to be to a team like the hat I'm wearing, or perhaps even
y'all already have one though. Y'all already have a quarterback.
Well, that could develop too. That could develop, or it could be a team like Washington. Because one thing is true with Mr. Snyder is he's a great marketing guy. He's a genius when it comes to marketing. And they've tried to pick up some big name players in the past that maybe were a little bit past their prime. But now a player like Deshaun Watson, if he comes into Washington, what you're looking at is a legitimate Super Bowl contender from the NFC. So it could be one of those two teams. Do I think he'll be traded? It depends how bad internally this situation is. Can it be fixed, or is it to a point where it cannot be fixed? And I don't know that answer. So it could go either way. But if he ends up going somewhere, it's definitely going to be for a pretty penny. I know they're talking about probably 3 number ones and a player, starter on defense. Is he worth it? All day and twice on Sundays.
Do you think that Trevor Lawrence is actually going to have a great season his rookie year?
The odds are against it. Just historically, what I've seen, not taking anything away from Trevor or what he's done in college or anything like that, but it is so rare that you see a quarterback come in from college, especially a top draft pick, and have a great season right off the bat, especially with a team where he'll probably end up that's mostly, rebuilding with a new situation. Will he show moments? Yes, he will. Will he have a great season? He'll go through his growing pains. I mean, there's a couple things, Mr. Franklin, I look at when you transition to our listeners, when you look at guys coming off from college going to the National Football League. Number one, the ball's bigger in the NFL than it is in college. That's an adjustment, believe it or not, for these guys. And number two, it's a whole new cast of characters. These aren't his same guys he's been working with for the last, a few years. He's transitioned obviously from high school to college, so he's made this transition before, but it's a new cast of characters to work with. It's a new situation. And I'll share this with you too, and a couple more things. NFL defenses are extraordinarily more complex than college defenses, because they have a lot more time to work on things, and they've had a lot lot more, with the guys that are playing. And another thing too is the game is much faster. I remember watching RG3 when he came out. We all remember how highly touted he was coming out of Baylor. And I remember RG3, he always used to run and have those wheels. So at college, he would he would scramble out to his right or his left, and he would hit that edge and he would just go. He would take off like a plane. But I remember the first preseason game, I think it was against the Chicago Bears, if I remember, when he first came to Washington. He took off for the preseason. He took off for the right side. And I can't remember the linebacker, whether it was Roper or it was somebody on the Bears. But I mean, that guy met him on the edge and he blew him up. And I remember RG3 getting up with his eyes about this wide, like, wow. like they aren't this fast. They don't have this kind of range where I'm from. Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore type of look on his face. It's just the speed of the game is different. So for most guys, it takes some time. I remember when I came back, I went to the Senior Bowl in 2011, had the blessed opportunity to sit next to Lee Steinberg, the super agent, who's Patrick Mahomes' agent, right?
Say Patrick Mahomes' agent.
Patrick Mahomes' agent, yeah. This is the guy back when I was even growing up. He had his arms around the first 2-3 draft picks every year, and I just happened to sit next to him. It was one of those blessed opportunities, again, where somebody was led into my path. And so I'm sitting right across the aisle from him, going from Mobile to Houston. And we started talking about quarterbacks. And of course, that's his specialty. I mean, Lee Steinberg is Mr. Quarterback, And so they're talking about, we get to talking. He was in the mood to talk. And he was trying to make a comeback in the NFL and himself. And, he said, listen, Dan, let me tell you something. He goes, quarterbacks are like a fine wine. They take time to develop. He said, unfortunately, most of these teams don't have the patience, don't have the time. These staffs, they got 2-3 years to turn around or they're gone. It takes time. So a lot of times that's why you see it takes some time, like a Taylor Heineke, for example, in Washington. He's bounced around for a few years. We talk again about Rich Gannon. We talked about, you see Trent Dilfer. You see these guys bounce around for a few years before they finally find a home and make it happen. So will he have success? Yeah, he'll show up moments. He's got natural ability where he'll be like, oh wow, that's incredible. Will it all come together the first season wherever he ends up? I highly doubt it. I mean, for every Dan Marino, there's 100 guys that never do it. So I mean, it'll be interesting. But that's, if you're asking me, I think it's going to take time, like it has for most people in the NFL making that transition.
How have you adapted since the pandemic hit?
Personally?
Yes.
It's been wild. It's been different. As a matter of fact, my wife and I and one of our daughters made the move from Arizona to Key West, Florida, in a moving truck about 2 weeks before the pandemic broke out. It's been unlike anything anybody's ever seen. All of us who are, unless no one's ever seen anything like this. We just watch it in movies. It's been it's been very trying. It's been very challenging at times. But for me personally, I keep my eyes on the Lord. So I just kind of steamroll right through things the best I possibly can. But has it affected my mind? Has it affected me? Well, sure. I mean, from one moment to the next, nobody has any ideas what's going to happen. One day this is happening, next day that's happening. It's almost like I was living 30 miles away from ground zero when 9/11 happened. And it was to be recalled that what a game changer that was. This is a real game changer. It's changing people around us. It's changing the world around us, changing the environment around us. So it's an adjustment. It's like anything else in life. Things change, things don't stay the same. But I mean, I got my head up, I got my eyes on my dreams. I just kind of plow through it, keep my eyes on Jesus Christ as I plow through things for me personally. But it's definitely been unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. So I mean, it's been wild to say the least.
Without combine, what advice could you give some of these young draftees that are not going to get that much exposure on them without combine this year?
Find creative ways to be noticed, positive ways. Hey, don't go out there like Trevor Lawrence. If you guys are all sitting in front of a computer right now, don't go put a handgun in front of your chest and he's holding a handgun. One of the pictures, if you Google his name and type pistol or handgun after it, don't get noticed for the wrong reasons because every team's watching. But really find new ways to be. I mean, that's one of the things when people ask me, how do I get in the NFL? Well, obviously the first round guys, they just have to turn on the TV and start clapping and cheering and their families around them. But for all the rest of the guys, one of the biggest things I share with people, whether you're in coaching, scouting, playing, whatever you are, find a way to separate from the competition. Again, pay attention to those ideas that just come out to you out of the blue. Another thing too is find the right agent if you haven't already, because really and truly there's 10% of the guys in the NFL that are superstar status, if you will, the Tom Brady, Brady's, et cetera, in the world. All the rest of the guys, believe it or not, when I turn on the film, most of the guys are just guys. Okay, they're you know, the difference between a street free agent and a guy who's on a team a lot of times is having the right agent be able to pick up the phone. And because I know this, because one of my jobs was screening the calls for the directors at the Jets. They're like, hey, we want to take calls from Jimmy Sexton, Lee Steinberg, Drew Rosenhaus, anybody else. Tell them we're at lunch, you know, so that type of thing. So you know, having the right agent is critically important. Now, most of those guys, you know, only entertain the top talent in the world. But, you know, finding different ways, finding different creative ways. If you're a young guy trying to get in the NFL, maybe you're a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th free agent guy, you know, start jumping on some podcasts, you know, like yours. Start jumping on some different shows. Reach out to different media outlets. So reach out to your newspapers and see, hey, would you be willing to, you know, if you live in Minneapolis, for example, reach out where I'm from, reach out to Minneapolis Star and Tribune and go to the website, look at their sports editors, look at the reporters, you know, start like writing like emails. Hey, I'm coming on the draft. Would you like to do a feature story on me? Anything, something, because you never know, because those stories might get in front of NFL scouts with the Vikings, for example, or with different cities, you know, and all of a sudden a scout notices you, because really when you get down in those 5th, 6th, 7th, especially the undrafted guys, the difference is you have to have a scout that's willing to jump on the table for you. Now, you got to be a good player, obviously, but if you can get in front of somebody and get your story in front of somebody and it resonates with them, you never know what can happen. You may have a scout with the Green Bay Packers jump up at the table and say, hey, we got to sign this guy. And it's because he saw the article in the newspaper about you. So find creative ways. I mean, that's the biggest thing in doing. One thing I can warn everybody against, and I do this in scouting, and it's the same thing as players. If you're trying to get into the NFL as a player, to answer your question, you got to find a different way of doing it, because there's so much competition. Everybody's sending in, or, you know, a highlight tape. Everyone's sending this stuff in. You have to find a different way of doing it. So start thinking about channeling your story through the media.
And my last question for you is, what NFL draftee are you looking at right now that you are intrigued by?
A lot of them.
Like, all right, let me ask you this. Where do you think Justin Fields is going to land?
It depends. Some teams love him, some teams hate him, and there's nothing in between. You know, it's you know, it just depends. I mean, much of the situation comes down to finding the right fit, finding the right system the guy can have success in. Case in point, Tom Brady. Okay, Tom Brady comes in the New England Patriots. It's a 6th-round draft pick out of Michigan. You know, he fit that system. Would we be talking about Tom Brady today if he'd been drafted by Oakland?
No.
Who knows? No. You know, he just happened to be the right place, right time with Charlie Weiss, etc. So it depends what system he gets drafted by. It depends if it's a fit, if that resonates with him. You know, if they're going to be a team that's going to play to his strengths, or if it's going to be a team that tries to box him in and tries to make him something he's not. The great coaches in the NFL, like Bill Belichick and these guys, what they'll do is they'll recognize a player's strengths and they'll build around that guy as a leader. And so if you get a team that's willing to bring him in and say, hey, you know what? You are our franchise guy from day one, and we're going to build around you. Talk to us. Be involved in the process. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. What kind of receivers? If you get a team like that that's all in with him, he's probably going to have a pretty good NFL career. If you get a team that says, hey, we want you to be, you know, we don't want you to run. We want you to just be a drop back guy. We want, you know, we don't want you to do this. We don't want you. If some team tries to make them what they want him to be, he could struggle.
So before I let you go, where can my viewers actually find some of your work, your writings, or reporting?
All over the place. If you got Google, type in Daniel Kelly NFL, Daniel Kelly New York Jets. You type in the name of my book, whatever it takes. It looks like this. It's a true story of a fan making the NFL. It's available anywhere where books are sold online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you name it. But really anywhere on Twitter, I'm at Daniel Kelly Book. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on podcasts all over the world. I'm just starting a new show on 100 yards of football. If you type in Daniel Kelly Sports Illustrated Detroit Lions, you'll see the full body of my work if you click on my name. Anywhere, really. I mean, seriously. I mean, I've been in USA Today, New York Times. I've been all over the place. So you don't have to look far to find me.
I agree.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate it because, really and truly what I tried to do, Mr. Franklin, is it's not just about, hey, look at me, hey, look at my story, hey, this. It's really about, bring you unique insights and perspective you cannot find anywhere else in media because of my unique background as being a fan in the NFL, that kind of thing. And it's really about helping you and encouraging you to your story. You, the listener I'm talking to, what is your dream? Because that's what I always try to do. I try to help propel people towards their dreams.
Amen to that. As I will always say, there are 3 P's in life. You got to be passionate, you got to have purpose, and you have to be persistent. And you have all 3 P's, man. And I love that high energy. I love everything that you're doing. Again, thank you for joining me. This is Fago Franklin III. Y'all can definitely follow me on Instagram, which is SuperJournalist87. Y'all can follow me on my Facebook, which is Fago Franklin III. Y'all can Google me. As like Daniel said, y'all can Google. You can Google me at Fago Franklin III, or either you can see me on LinkedIn, and it shows you all the interviews that I have done with community leaders, sports figures, celebrities, and positive people that are doing positive things in this world. Thank you again for joining me, and definitely have a blessed one, my friend.
You're very welcome, Mr. Franklin. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone who listened. Thank you very much. God bless you. Have a great day.
Yes, sir. You too. All right, now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.